And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. I'm Taylor Phillips. He's Ed Smith. Got to talk about the Michigan win over the Washington Huskies in the National College Football Playoff Championship game. Quick mention on Mel Tucker. We'll talk Lions, Red Wings, and Pistons, even a little bit of Tigers as well. But first off, the Michigan Wolverines ranked number one. They beat the Washington Huskies 34-13 to win the College Football Playoff National Championship. J.J. McCarthy finished 10 of 18 passing for 140 yards, 58.4 quarterback rating. Blake Corum, 21 carries for 134 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, which were both insurance touchdowns in the late in the fourth quarter. Donovan Edwards opened the scoring with 2 touchdowns on his own, both rushes on 6 carries for 104 rushing yards. But for Washington, the Huskies, Michael Penix Jr., 27 of 51 for 255 passing yards, 1 touchdown pass, and 2 interceptions, both to Will Johnson and then Mikey Sainristil, who caught a strike on an overthrown pass to seal the game. And only 46 rushing yards total by the entire Washington running unit. The Wolverines really did a really good job stopping the run, while Michael Penix Jr. was throwing more than passing, throwing more than handing it off to any running back that he had available. But Michigan, they got the job done.
Well, and that I will say before I deep dive into the analysis, that was one reason why that Washington couldn't get their running game going, is because they were dealing with a running back by committee, and it's mainly due to the fact that their starting running back Dylan Johnson had re-injured his foot in the game against Texas. Tried to give it a go here, and either he re-aggravated that injury or something else on his leg had gotten caught up. But either way, he just could not give it a go. So between all that, knowing it was already going to be a difficult task going up against the Michigan run defense, that kind of threw everything out the window in terms of what Washington would have wanted to do in terms of being productive on the ground. Now, as for how this game looked entirely on its own, there's so many ways to cover it. You brought out some stats, Taylor. Mentioned the 106 yards by Donovan Edwards. Blake Corum getting the 2 touchdowns to salt the game away. If you want to say reminiscent of how, say, for example, Mark Ingram iced the national championship for Alabama 2009, you could say that, for example. But frankly, you got to go over this from a narrative thread from start to finish. And frankly, from the beginning, you could tell Michigan was not only the better football team, but they were the more physical football team. They ran the football. Whenever they ran the football, they were effective nearly every single time, even when Washington bottled them up for a little bit in the second half. When they finally needed to get those key touchdowns to break this game and break Washington, they did. And thanks in large part due to the not just the fact that you saw Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards bring their absolute best. You also saw Kalel Mullings get involved. And Taylor, how many weeks now have I been calling for Michigan to say, hey, you need to get Mullings involved. You need to get Mullings involved. You need to get Mullings involved. Well, it seems that they have saved that trick for when they absolutely needed to save it, because Mullings had some very key runs on those first couple set of drives that not only took the load off of Corum, but also lulled Washington to sleep, I would say, because they didn't know what kind of back to expect. Because let's not forget, Texas last week showcased the blueprint of how to handle this Washington team, this Husky team, because of how effective they were at running the football themselves. So knowing full well that Michigan, that played full well into what Michigan does so well themselves, it was not surprised to see how effective that they were at running the football. So much, in fact, that it came out to determine, saw that the final stat, Michigan had 303 yards rushing, 300 yards on the ground. By the way, that was more than Washington had as offense total. So that right there alone tells you how this game was won. It was Michigan doing what they wanted to do at their absolute best when they wanted to do it. They were the better team. They were the more physical team. And frankly, I was so impressed with Donovan Edwards. Talk about the return of the Don. You saw it in full blast. It was like seeing flashbacks back to Ohio State from 2022 all over again. Back-to-back runs, back-to-back touchdowns, absolutely stunning the Washington portion of the crowd. Sent Ann Arbor into a tizzy, and frankly, it was an example of how, in my opinion, his patience and his unselfishness finally paid off because people were making comment about his production was down. His numbers are down. He's not showcasing what we saw last year. And all this talk, and mainly this due to the fact that you did see a healthy 100% Blake Corum. So of course he was going to get the bulk of that litter. Donovan knew that. He knew Blake was going to be the bell cow, frankly, of how this whole offense was generated, and all the other weapons that you had. It wasn't going to be exactly like it was last year. But frankly, between the patients that he saw, mentioning the therapist that he was seeing throughout this season, everything aligned itself so well to where Donovan Edwards, his unselfishness paid off, and it paid off in the best way you could have possibly have ever imagined. Now, I have not heard anything yet about whether or not he will be declaring, but in my opinion, if he does come back, not only would he be the projected starting running back on the depth chart next year, I would say, in my opinion, put him on as a potential, if not short list, then at least as a dark horse for the Heisman Trophy. That's my thought about Donovan Edwards.
Yeah. What class is Donovan Edwards? I know Blake Corum might get drafted soon, but
Blake is a senior, but Edwards is a junior, so he has 1 year of eligibility left.
Okay, gotcha.
Same thing with JJ. JJ has 1 year of eligibility left yet also. That's why when the team had come back, they had a rally at Schembechler Hall. You heard the fans chanting at JJ, 1 more year, 1 more year. JJ was not committal to that answer at the time, which is understandable. He wanted to enjoy the moment. So we'll figure out what his future is when, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I thought JJ, compared to what we saw against TCU, there was no mistakes. There was no panic. He was smart. He did exactly what I said last week, what he needed to do. Be effective, be aware, be calm, be present, and the rest will handle itself. And you saw that. There was no mistakes. There was no awful throws, no bad turnovers, no pick sixes, none of that. When JJ needed to be effective, especially when Washington was hemming on him and making things difficult in the passing game, guess what? He adjusted. He adapted. He made plays. He used his legs. He used his feet, finally, because there was a couple of times during that game where when you saw Washington really start to zero in on Blake, that's why you didn't see him break up too many runs, or frankly, Edwards for that matter, after that first quarter. Washington made a great adjustment to that, and that's one reason why this game had become a defensive battle, frankly, for the majority of that game. That Washington defense, they became a wall. I know the final score will say otherwise, but let's not forget, for the majority of that game was close. Washington had allowed, from after those first 2 touchdowns, they had allowed only 3 points for the majority of that game. So you got to give them credit on that end. Also, Michigan, though, they did stagnate on their end a couple of times, mainly for one possession that was near the end of halftime. It was a 4th and short opportunity near midfield. At first, Harbaugh considered punting, which I thought would have been to me, it's an either or. It's a 50-50 kind of call. I can understand why people thought, why did they go for it? Why not just punt it? Try to play the field position game, especially when you saw how the end result turned out. But, I didn't mind that call in that moment. I think Washington just did a better job executing on defense because in terms of playing the right coverage, timing, not letting anybody get open, Washington just played better defense on that play. So I didn't mind the play call, and I didn't mind the decision to go for it. It's just unfortunate that Washington then immediately took that momentum and it scored that touchdown. So that's what made things nervous going into halftime, and as we played through that third quarter. Like I said, the defense on both teams showed out. And speaking of defense, my goodness, Taylor, can we talk about this Michigan defense? Can we now give them their flowers?
Especially the pass rush.
We have to give them oh my goodness, the pass rush. This whole defense entirely needs their flowers from top to bottom, and should be considered, in my opinion, as one of the upper echelon, pure all-time winning defenses. Frankly, when you are a 15-0 national championship team and you are ranked as consistently as the best defense in terms of points allowed, yards allowed, all the metrics, stopping the run, getting to the quarterback, having two high caliber perimeter corners in both Will Johnson and Mikey Sanders, still having that defensive line that you mentioned, Chris Jenkins, Mason Grant, Kenneth Grant. Oh my goodness gracious, especially those two men. Mason Graham, you saw what he did in the Rose Bowl, winning defensive MVP. This game, he had a key pressure early. I believe it was on the first play of the second half. He affected Penix in the pocket, which is what led to the ridiculous yet incredible interception by Will Johnson near the sideline, where Johnson had to first grab it, had it knocked out of his hands, yet somehow recollected himself to catch it and stay in bounds at the same time. Frankly, it's kind of fitting and not surprising because what? He was wearing number 2. That's definitely something Charles Woodson would have done. So frankly, between Johnson, by the way, speaking of eligibility, Will Johnson's a sophomore. So yeah, you'll be seeing him again next year. Frankly, he's already confident. He's saying, "quote We're gonna try to run it back." So that already lets you know of what his mindset is for next year. And frankly, after seeing what Mike Sanders still built himself into, and I'll get to him in just a moment, it's quite enticing and exciting to see what kind of draft prospect Will Johnson could turn himself into in the very near future. So, but that defense in general, Chris Jenkins going out, this was his final game as a senior, and I'll get to those seniors in just a moment itself, but he was quite effective of himself, a disruptive force. But frankly, the two stars of that, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, these two absolute monstrous mountains of men wreaking havoc, making life absolute hell for Michael Penix Jr. all night in that pocket, not letting him get out. Frankly, in my opinion, because of the pressure that you saw being caused to Penix, that's why he looked so off. That's why you saw him making what should have been easy routine throws to Odunze and Polk. He's over missing them by 4 or 5 yards, including one that should have been an open walk-in touchdown. But yet, for some reason, Penix, he was just off. And you know what? I don't know if people will ever give credit for it, but one reason why he was off, that Michigan defense. They kicked his ass. They gave him a pounding. They beat him up from beginning to end. It was frankly something that you saw a combination of what they did to CJ Stroud in 2022, what they did against Jalen Milroe last week, and what they did here tonight, this week again against Penix. They took away his strengths. They made him one-dimensional, and they frustrated him, and they pounded the shit out of him, and they broke him. And frankly, I got to give Penix some credit because he played through that second half hurt. He played through majority of that second half hurt. There was something wrong with his side. I don't know if it was an oblique or his ribs, but he got beat up in that second half.
His ribs.
Yeah,
I got beat up either way.
Yeah, I want to say it was his ribs too. It looked like, but still, he hung in there. Frankly, you could argue though that he probably should have been taken out at some point in that game, especially when he got out of hand, to save him from getting further damage. But credit to him, he is an absolute fine young man. She showcased, in my opinion, even in defeat, what kind of character he is. And that should showcase what you would want to see in an NFL type of quarterback. So, but still, at the end of the day, the Michigan Wolverines, in my opinion, proved once again of the very big motto: defense wins championships. Because even though the offense had the necessary weapons and pieces to do something effective, it should be remembered that this Michigan national championship was won on its defense, without question.
Yes, defense and offense, both ways. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
and I want to touch on Michael Penix Jr. for a bit. I was actually not aware of him playing through an injury until after the game officially ended by time clock, when Penix walked off the field battered and bruised and all that stuff.
Holding his ribs, Jalen Harrell coming up to console him and congratulate him on a job well done. Yeah, you saw that camera shot. But I noticed early on, and they even focused.
That's why we respect him.
Yeah, they even did a shot on it though early on in the third, from Penix reacting to either taking a shot or whatever it was, grabbing his side, and then they speculated on it, and it was confirmed that it was his ribs. So he was playing hurt essentially that entire second half, and that affected his rhythm, that affected how he threw, that affected his whole play. And once again, that has to be credited to that. I know Penix has dealt with his fair share of injuries. That's why he had his. That's one reason why he has had so many years of eligibility. But it should be noted that how he looked in the past, in all season, in the past, especially the past few weeks, was nothing compared to what we saw against Michigan, and that should be a credit to the Wolverines defense.
Yes, and that's why they're national champions.
Yes, but still,
the running game.
Yep,
everything else.
Everything was coming together,
and their secondary, including Sanders still and Will Johnson.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the pick by Johnson, but let's not forget Sanders still the game he had, making a couple of very key open field tackles, because let's not forget he did get juked in the open field on that first touchdown by Alabama last week in the Rose Bowl. So that stuck in his mind. So he made sure to not repeat those mistakes. Had a couple of key tackles that stopped Washington from getting any yards after the catch, stifled their momentum, stopped their drive, and then of course we saw near the end of the fourth, on the 4th and 13, the interception that frankly sealed the deal. I almost kind of wished he had done the pick six, because frankly, after everything that
made it.
Because frankly, it would have been the perfect summation. Because let's not forget, this was a young man that came here, 3-star out of Massachusetts, as a wide receiver. He's been here since 2019. He was here for the COVID year. He was then asked, hey, listen, we think you may be doing better for us if you switch to DB. Takes that challenge heads on, becomes one of their best defensive players, a team captain, one of their absolutely most necessary, without question, one of, if not their clear defensive leader, a team captain. And frankly, let's not forget the speech that he had on the bench in Columbus 2022 in that fourth quarter, when he challenged that team to say, hey, look at Ohio State. We know what they're made of. We know we can break them. You want the natty? Let's go get it. It took a year. It took some time. But Mikey Sanders still making play after play after play this year, putting up yards and production with his defense, with his interceptions, with his pick sixes. Taylor, do you know, with the amount of yards and the touchdowns that he put up this year, Mike Sanders still could have been the third best receiver for the Iowa Hawkeyes?
Oh, man. I'm going to pull this up right about now. Let's see. I'm going to dig up the box score, and then I'll. I
believe it was about two. Between Michigan, about two. I believe it was about two.
Still.
It was about 200 or 300 or so in total yards, in terms of those return yards that he had on
two
each
touchdowns
of those
total.
Yeah, on each of those
2023.
44
total tackles.
Mm-hmm.
So 26 solo, 18 assisted tackles, 2 sacks, 6 interceptions, 232 yards.
Those 6 picks.
Yeah, 232 yards on and interception returns.
Look at that. Exactly. That's something that you would see from a 4th-string receiver, and he's doing that.
His longest was 81.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And of course,
super crazy, baby.
And frankly, listen, you remember a couple years back when I started beating the drum for saying, hey, I want to see Aiden Hutchinson with the Detroit Lions. I'm thinking.
I told you earlier, Sanders still might be a Detroit Lion as well.
But I'm just saying, if I'm Brad Holmes, I got to look at the fact that I'm looking at a player that, A, fills a position of need, B, is a player that has versatility to where, you know what, he could fit very much perfectly in that wacky aggressive mindset of Dan Campbell of saying, hey, if we're going to be running trick plays with offensive linemen, what kind of gadget guy perfectly to use for another trick play than a guy who played both receiver and defensive back in college? Not to mention the fact that, again, I talked about his character his versatility, how he conducts and carries himself, and you hear it and how he talks on the panels and interviews and press conferences. Frankly, he's someone who can be, even though he's a young man, he can be a future leader and a captain for your team and for your defense. And if I am Brad Holmes, I'm not saying, like second round. No, I don't think you. But again, if you're hearing calls, if you're hearing murmurs that, hey, someone may be trying to get him, if you are interested. But I'm just saying, if I'm Brad Holmes, I would take a gander at him, especially if he does well at the combine. But frankly, as Dan Campbell would say, we pay attention more what's on the tape. And if you pay attention to what's on the tape, how could you not want to have a guy like Mike Sanders still on your roster? He'll be a perfect complement in that team, in that squad, because frankly, your veterans,
that's secondary as well.
Yes, but yeah, and you're setting a foundation, because let's be honest. Even though bringing in guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Cam Sutton help, they're not going to be there forever. The guys, however, that you drafted, the Melifonwus, the Kirby Josephs, the Brian Branches,
Jerry Jacobs.
Well, actually, I think I heard that he just actually got cut. He got waived. Actually.
Oh,
yeah. Makeup.
Well,
hey, roster spot. Listen, CJ was coming back, and James Houston, so they had to make a roster spot.
I see. Yeah,
somebody had to go. But listen, I mentioned those guys.
We'll get to them shortly.
But listen, the reason why I mentioned Sanders still is because, like I said, if you have a foundation core with Joseph, with Melifonwu, with Brian Branch, even with Tracy Walker being part of the old guard, because remember, he was a draft pick here too. Adding a guy like Sanders still to that mix, in my opinion, it would be a massive upgrade for your secondary. Absolutely.
Yes, and that's big too, because that secondary needs even more help.
Oh yeah, you wish you would. Frankly, you wish you would have Sanders still for this weekend.
And Sanders still's a senior, by the way. I was going to mention.
Yeah, but and frankly, but how he performed this year, in my opinion, his stock should have him at no worse than say a fourth round. I would say third or fourth round would be his ceiling.
Fair enough. Either way, the Lions really need him.
Yeah,
they need to start negotiating with him ahead of time.
Well, in terms of legalities and what you're allowed to do, if he's interested, he'll get an invite, he'll get a workout. Especially, and like I said, they'll probably like what they see at the combine and how he presents himself, and look at how he shows his mentality and his character. Because that's how you're going to get to know a player, especially when you're doing these one-on-one interviews. That's why they saw what they liked in Aiden Hutchinson. That's why they saw what they liked in Sam Laporta, for example. Yep. So if they can get if they get a chance to where they can get themselves that time alone with Mike Sanders still, I guarantee you they'll be just as impressed. And frankly, if I'm Brad Holmes, if it happens that way, I'm taking him. In the first chance I get, I'm taking him. But back into what Michigan, but back to Mikey's team itself, is he was just one journey, one story out of many in terms of, let's talk about the narratives of this whole team in general. Yes, we understand of the scandals, plural. Yes, we understand the nature of the investigations. Yes, we understand fans will look at this as tainted, asterisk. I don't care, okay? I am 30 years old. I barely have memories of 1997. I remember the pain of 2006. I remember the pain of 2016. I remember coming up short against Georgia. I remember what happened last year against TCU. And that's just not just the playoff losses. Okay, I remember all sorts of bad memories and moments to where you would think, Michigan, yeah, we're leaders of this. Yeah, we got the all-time winningest program. Yeah, we got this tradition and heritage and lore, but we've had some pain. We've had some awful moments of heartbreak. We've had these Sisyphean moments of where, it looks like we're at the top of the mountain, and then all of a sudden we roll back down the hill of the boulder, okay? Like, I remember, Plaxico Burress. I remember Anthony Thomas fumbling against Northwestern. I remember TJ Duckett with the clock gate in 2001. I remember 2006, Bo Schembechler dying the day before the 1-2 game against Ohio State and then losing that game. I remember Appalachian State. I remember Oregon stomping our asses out the next week prior. I remember the end of the Lloyd Carr era being so miserable, ending in a wet, rainy day against Ohio State. I remember the Rich Rodriguez era. I remember losing to Toledo. I remember our defense becoming an embarrassment. I remember our program becoming an embarrassing laughing stock. I remember losing to Ohio State. I remember losing to Michigan State. I remember you raised me up. I remember Brady Hoke. I remember getting our asses kicked so badly against Michigan State that Brady Hoke had to apologize. I remember Shane Morris coming out against Minnesota with a concussion, looking like a zombie. I remember David Brandon. I remember trouble with the snap. I remember JT Barrett. I remember Jake O'Korn. I remember getting our ass kicked against Wisconsin. I remember
John O'Korn?
John O'Korn, whatever. I remember the revenge tour blowing up in smoke. I remember Don Brown. I remember Al Borges. I remember 2-4. I remember the COVID year. I remember losing to Indiana. I remember almost losing to freaking Rutgers. Okay. I remember Kenneth Walker. And of course, I just brought up I remembering Georgia and TCU. So guess what? All that pain, all those memories, it was building. It meant that much more to me. And frankly, it was sinking in a little bit more and more and more. It really didn't hit me that night, Monday night, watching it. But in the days and the moments, and really even up to this second very now, yes, it's sinking in for me very much gloriously. Yes, my team, my college football team, won the friggin' national championship. You're damn right. 15-0. The story I said, finished the story. That's exactly what exactly they went out and did. Blake Corum said business was finished. The journey had been completed. Michigan, you finished the story. That's exactly what you needed to do. And to those seniors who stayed, the seniors that came back to stay, like Blake Corum, like Zach Zinner, Taylor Keegan, Chris Jenkins, Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, Makari Page, Josh Wallace, Braden McGregor, Michael Bennett, Jake Fall, Trente Jones, Drake Nugent, AJ Barnes. I could go on, but still, you get the gist of it. Those players came back for a reason, for a mission, and with their coaches, and frankly, for Jim Harbaugh, and I'll get to him in a second, they did what they needed to do. They got the job done. And for Jim Harbaugh, if this is indeed it for him, frankly, what better way to go out? You beat Ohio State's ass 3 years in a row. You win the Big Ten championship 3 years in a row. You've been the 3 straight college football playoffs. You win the Rose Bowl. We found out now officially today you retired Nick Saban. You beat Alabama. And now you're national champions, 15-0. And frankly, whatever happens with these investigations, however they make people try to spin it, I don't give a shit. We got it done. We got the dub. We got the chip. You can't take it away from it.
Exactly. And to top the cherry on top of the sundae, the NCAA president stated that Michigan won fair and square.
No
despite
kidding.
all that.
No kidding. Because if you notice, after this whole fiasco, this whole Connor Stallions news started popping up when he was let go from the program, what happened? We still kept winning.
He resigned technically.
Even still, when he was gone, what happened? We still kept winning, and we still kept kicking everyone's asses, even without our head coach, mind you.
For 6 regular season games.
And then into the playoffs.
Yep. Well, he was there the entire playoffs and the Big Ten championship game, which was a cakewalk, 26-0 over Iowa. I still can't believe Iowa's offense decided not to show up. I know Michigan's defense is great, but my God.
Frankly, we knew Iowa's offense was not going to show up because look at their division. Look at the Big Ten division. We knew. Going into that game, we knew full well what Iowa's offense was going to bring. That was diddly poo. So as long as Michigan didn't fall on themselves, trip over themselves like they did against TCU, we were going to be fine. And that's exactly what we saw what happened. It took a while. It became a slug, but they got it done.
Yeah.
It was, and frankly, this game here against Washington, it reminded me of how they played against them in 2021. Let's not forget that frankly, and you know what, it's all and mentioned about stories and bookmarkings. This kind of feels full circle of a book ending because when they met in 2021, that was kind of like the jumpstart of what Michigan was trying to do because that was after Jim Harbaugh had said, hey, we're going to beat Ohio State or die trying. And that was one of those early season games in prime time. That's when you saw what the future seeds of what everything was going to look like for this program. The Blake Corum touchdown runs, the showcasing of Aiden Hutchinson. That was all, and like foreshadowing the Michigan defensive line wreaking havoc and wrecking shit for Washington. So seeing all that come together, priceless. Most beautiful thing you can ever see.
Indeed.
I mean, sorry, by the way, I know I got a little bit long-winded there, but trust me, I've been, all those memories kept flooding back in that very moment. So I had to let it rip there. I had to.
I know.
Moment.
Yeah, all the pain is gone.
Oh yeah, it's cathartic. Cathartic. You can release it all. Because what? You climb the mountaintop. You reach that horizon, you've gotten to the promised land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now at least a few players, which are seniors, may declare for the NFL draft as well. We know one of them officially did earlier today, and
Who was the player? I wasn't. Yeah, if you
Michigan. The news. Let's take a look. Junior Colson, the linebacker.
That doesn't surprise me. I could see him going second or third round linebacker. Yeah, he was quite productive this year as well. And frankly, the fact that he was still getting things done with injuries to both his hands speaks about his character and how he plays the game as well, and how he treats and respects the game too. So, any player that picks him up will be lucky to pick him up. Frankly, if I'm Baltimore, if I'm John Harbaugh, because let's not forget, some people, not just John Harbaugh, some members from the Ravens front office was at that game. And frankly, if I'm looking at what I saw from how physical that Michigan team was, from their offensive line, and especially to what won Blake Corum, I would be very interested in seeing into what their draft strategy would look like. I'm just saying, especially knowing that Blake is a native from Virginia too. So,
yeah, we'll stay on top of that too. Speaking of college football, developing news, former Michigan State Spartans football head coach Mel Tucker's appeal was denied by the court. So
that's not surprising, considering the fact that his whole case was already settled and dismissed by the MSU board, by the board of trustees and everything in the Title IX case. In regards, and it was found that he did violate the bylaws of what he did. He had been sexually harassing this woman that he'd been engaging in contact with.
Yep.
Brenda Tracy, excuse me.
Yeah, Brendan Tracy. Yes. That's why. Yep.
And this was just this appeal. And frankly, since it has been denied, I think we can officially say, hey, you know what, this case is closed. He's now gone from the program. All that has been left in the dust. We can officially put a book on this and move on to a new era, especially now what they're trying to see now, what they're seeing with Jonathan Smith is what he's trying to do.
Yep. Transitioning to pro football, the NFL, the Detroit Lions beat the Minnesota Vikings 34-20 at Ford Field to finish their regular season at 12-5. As I predicted, 12-5 NFC North Championship. Now they just need to fulfill my full prediction by winning at least one playoff game, but we'll get to that a bit later on. David Montgomery, let me take a look at the Lions real fast. Viking. Oh, 30-20. I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Check that. That's 30. Yeah, 30-20. Thank you very much. The box score. Jared Goff, 23-32 for 320 passing yards. Yikes. David Montgomery, 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs, 13 for 30 and a touch. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7 catches for 144 receiving and a touchdown. Sam Laporta,
70-yarder.
Yep. And then Sam Laporta, 5 catches for 29 and a touch before he got injured, before he got hurt with his knee. But Donovan Peoples-Jones had a couple of catches as well. Interceptions, Cam Sutton and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. That's about it. Cam Sutton, a 23-yard interception return. to seal it, and then C.J. Gardner-Johnson, his first pick as a
First game
Lion,
back. First
just
game.
a little more icing on the defensive cake.
And also first game back from his injury, too.
Exactly. Third appearance total this regular season. He finally came up with a pick. It was a matter of time.
Well, frankly, if you were going to do it, it would have been against this quarterback. Because let's not forget, they did pick off Mullings 4 times in week 16. So I'm not surprised. It's not surprised to see him get 2 more off of him. But what is surprising is the fact that over the course of those 2 games, he threw for, I believe, a total of at least 800 yards, if not more.
396 in week 18 at Ford Field.
And then over 400 in week 16 in Minnesota. So yeah, that's 800 yards essentially that you gave up to this guy, a guy that looked like absolute garbage against everyone else.
411 to be exact.
Exactly. And the fact that you allowed him on one of those instances to be on the precipice of beating you would have me worried as to what this defense and this secondary could look like when Stafford comes to town on Sunday night.
807 total for Nick Mullins against the Lions, by the way.
Mm-hmm. But, Justin Jefferson did what he was supposed. Frankly, for Justin Jefferson, you wonder if this is his last game or not as a Viking. I would say bring him back. I think they're going to try to do their best to bring him and Kirk Cousins back. I don't know how they're going to have the money to do it, but we'll see. But, frankly, the overall theme of this game was try to not have it be a complete disaster, because more than likely, even if you had won this game, you was going to end up with a 3rd seed regardless. So the main objective was to not have anybody of importance get hurt. And frankly, you almost failed that one in a major catastrophic way, because Sam Laporta got hurt, injured his knee. Major hyperextension, bone bruise. He had to leave the game completely. Khalif Raymond even got hurt during that game too. So that was 2 starters.
Raymond didn't practice this week.
Laporta
is getting better, by the way.
Yeah, he did. Laporta did mention that he had done a few reps. He felt optimistic, so we'll see how that translates. Now, worth noting, this is in a way similar to the Travis Kelce injury that he sustained right before the opening night game of the season between the Lions and the Chiefs. However, it's worth noting that injury took place, I think, within the past 2 or 3 days leading up to the game, whereas Laporta is going to have a full whole week to have a chance to recuperate and rest and recover, to where, more than likely he will be a game time decision. And I frankly, at this point, it would not surprise me if he plays.
Yeah. And the Lions need him. And like you pointed out, like we mentioned, he's optimistic. He had an outside shot earlier this week. Laporta, in my opinion, is questionable, but he may be upgraded to probable later on this week.
I will still say game time decision to be on the safe side. But Laporta's, at least his presence, will be an important X factor, in my opinion, as to whether or not the Lions can get this win against the Rams. And what's going on, Chris?
Hey, yep. And we'll get to the Rams game up next, by the way. In fact, why don't we get to it right now?
Seems like a good timing for it.
Yep. Lions are 3-point favorites. They're 12-5. The Rams finished their regular season at 10-7. The NFC wildcard round game Saturday at 8:15 on NBC and Peacock. Apparently,
actually, no. From what I heard, it's the Sunday night game. It will be Sunday night.
Oh, that's right. I mistyped it.
The Peacock game Saturday night. That's the Kansas City Miami game.
That's right. I mistyped it. That was my bad. Sunday at 8:15 on NBC and Peacock. I was going to mention Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth are probably going to call this one.
More than likely, since it's the Sunday night 8:30 crew. it's the primetime special slot. It's the primetime slot period. It's where they normally have the Sunday night broadcasts. Um, I think that it'll be one of, if not their last broadcast of the year for NBC because they don't have the Super Bowl this season. So yeah, more than likely you'll be seeing the A crew of Tirico and Collinsworth.
Yeah. So the Los Angeles Rams have excellent wide receivers. Can the Lions secondary hold up against those receivers?
Well, let's see. When you talk about the matchups, when you consider the fact that the obvious ones out the way. Let's look at Cooper Kupp. You look at Puka Nacua. Two guys who have had their usual outstanding seasons, at least in the case of Kupp, but also an out of nowhere breakout season from Nacua, who this is a rookie year from him. He set a rookie record of some sort. Well, I believe most receiving yards, or most touchdowns. One of those records he did set.
Cooper Kupp won the Super Bowl MVP 2 years ago.
Exactly, and that was in the middle, and that was at the culmination of his own record-breaking season. And guess what? Guess who was the quarterback for both those guys? The same quarterback who was the quarterback for Calvin Johnson when he had his own record-breaking season, now in 2012, and that was Matthew Stafford. I'll get to him in just a moment. But between what our secondary can do against their receivers, Cooper Kupp and Stafford have found a way to create such tremendous chemistry. I would dare say it's just as good, if not better, than the chemistry that he had with Megatron. Nacua has become a massive, outstanding breakout threat to where all eyes will be getting attention on him for sure. He can be even used as a decoy on some plays because you have other players and other weapons that you can use at your disposal, like DeMarco Robinson, who's had touchdowns in 4 straight games. He's had a touchdown catch in 4 straight games. And also Tyler Higbee, the tight end. We mentioned about Sam Laporta. Let's not forget about the other tight end in this game, who was a key offensive weapon himself, key weapon on this offense a couple years ago himself in Tyler Higbee. So I'll be paying attention to those guys on the offensive side of things. You'll see. Now, the thing is, even though you have those weapons, it's a matter of how Stafford himself is going to do in regard to certain tendencies. And, frankly, after a decade of watching him, I think I pretty much know what I'm talking about in terms of Stafford's tendencies. Is he going to have, doing the throws off his back foot? Is he going to be doing those no-look passes? Is he going doing the sidearm throws? And then, of course, is he really going to be doing his 50-50 jump balls down the field where for a fact it's either going to be you or the other guy, go up there and get it. So you have to know those tendencies. All those tendencies are going to show up in some way, shape, or form to where if it lends itself, Stafford, knowing his style, knowing how he plays and how he throws, he's going to present you with at least a chance at 1, if not 2 interceptions. And this is why you bring in guys like Cam Sutton and CJ Gardner-Johnson, those veterans that have studied Stafford, I'm sure, and would know where to be on those certain plays. Like, for example, if Stafford's going to throw a jump ball, which he will at some point, especially if it's off of a free play pre-snap penalty, somebody is got to be ready to go up there and bat that ball or get up there and jump up and contend, because that's Stafford's specialty. That's his bread and butter. That's what he, live by the sword, die by the sword kind of thing. That's what he will always go to. He will find a way to force it and chuck that thing down the field because he's got the arm power, he's got the strength, and he's got the capability to trust his guys to get there and find a way to thread it in. So, though that is what, I am looking at in terms of offensively what the Rams can do between their weapons, Stafford and his tendencies, and also let's not forget this, Taylor, Kyren Williams, this young man that came out of nowhere. I believe he had over 1,000 yards rushing for the Rams this year. His ability to be so effective at running the ball is one reason why the Rams have looked just as good with their offense since their Super Bowl run, in my opinion, because you have that balance that allows Stafford to not be so have everything be on, be so one-dimensional through him, is what I'm trying to say. So you have that, knowing that if you have a good running game that can control the clock and also keep the defense off balance, it sets you up so well offensively. So that's one reason why, amongst many others, and also knowing that you're matched up against this specific defense, why the Lions are only favored by 3, even though they're at home.
This might be a push if it comes down down to a field goal.
I would not be surprised if this ends up in a 1 or 2 point game. I'm being honest with you, because there's so many factors going into this. This is the Lions' first playoff appearance since 2016. So what that means, this is a new experience for a good majority and bulk of the players on this roster, except for save a certain few, like CJ Gardner-Johnson, and of course Jared Goff, notable examples. But for guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, James Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and on and on, especially that offensive line.
Jameson Williams is coming back, by the way.
Yeah, that was
full practice.
Exactly. And by the way, that's another X factor to look at too. Some people were freaking out initially over Laporta's injury, and I guess somehow they forgot the fact that, oh, by the way, you do have this guy named J-Mo who's going to be available for you next week. But there's that on the offensive side of things, and frankly,
this week now.
Exactly. And also, I believe, even though with Raymond being potentially out, that is going to be opening up a spot for who's going to be returning punts. So some people were thinking, all right, are they going to use J-Mo on special teams? Apparently, a short list have come out saying, no, J-Mo's not on that list, but they are looking at other guys to consider that role. I would say more than likely the guy to fill that spot would be Donovan Peoples-Jones. I know some people were reporting that Amon-Ra St. Brown was on that short list. I'm saying no. Okay, you're already using him as is. You don't want him to risk anything, any potential injury by adding more load to his plate. So having a guy like Peoples-Jones in there, and by the way, guaranteeing that he's going to get more touches and more in the game that way, why not use him for that spot? Especially when you don't have anything already set up or J-Mo invested in the special team system. I know they did mention about wanting to try looking into that for this offseason, but you just don't, this would be a bad time to try it for this game.
All right. So I'm gonna predict first this time. I'm gonna pick Lions 27, Rams 25.
Ooh, 27-25.
You mentioned it might be a 1 or 2 point game, right?
I could see that happening, but man, listen, I mentioned pretty much everything else except a couple other things. Yes, the Ford Field crowd will be at a frenzy. They'll be at a high pitch, but guess what? Stafford knows how to deal with that. He did play here for 12 years, in case everyone forgot that. And oh, by the way, he's been dealing with this every week. You do know that the Rams have no home field advantage. Their home stadium gets taken over literally every single week. So where it gets to a point where Stafford has to do the silent count at home for pre-snaps. So he'll be adjusted in terms of what to do and how to deal with the crowd noise here at Detroit, I believe. But still, I would still be aggressive. I would still bring the heat, still bring the pressure. And frankly, this is where having a guy like Ali McNeil back and also getting a guy like James Houston back, that's going to add necessary depth to the defensive line, and give help for Aiden Hutchinson. That's the main thing. You need help for your best player. So
exactly.
So that's how the lines between getting back CJ and now they're getting back James Houston. That's exactly what their defense needed. This is what I've been saying for the past few weeks, and now it looks like it's starting to come to fruition. So who knows? Maybe we'll see we'll see Peoples-Jones have a good return in the second somewhere in that game. It'll make that trade worth it after all. Who knows? But what can concern me though is the playoff experience, or rather inexperience, becomes a factor not just for the players but also for Dan Campbell. This is his first playoff game as a head coach. How will he react? How will he be aggressive or not in certain key situations and moments, especially when it comes to fourth down? You know, being aggressive in the regular season is fine, but will you be that same cat when it's playoff time and everything's on the table? We'll see. And if you're talking about the Rams, you can't help but mention of what one guy. You already know who I'm talking about. This absolute game wrecker, this absolute defensive monster. Frankly, the best defensive tackle I've seen since Reggie White. The guy who, in my opinion, should have been the Super Bowl MVP, but how he took over that second half, it is none other than Aaron Donald. And frankly,
yeah,
how he will move and try to affect not just going after Jared Goff, but also especially that Lions run game, how they run the ball will be very important in this game.
very interesting for David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs to go up against.
Well, not just our running backs, our whole entire offensive line, particularly Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell. Let's not, if you remember, those two had a skirmish in Sewell's rookie year when the Lions played the Rams at SoFi.
Yes,
so
a test for him as well.
So this will be a nice little reunion for them after 3 years. But frankly, if I'm McVay, I'm going to be moving Aaron Donald all over that line because, excuse me, if Aaron Donald is having some difficulties against Penei Sewell, just move him around, move him to a different spot. See how he does against Glasgow. See how he does against Frank Ragnow. And frankly, if you put him up against Taylor Decker, I'll be nervous. I'm just being honest with you. If Decker is going to be getting snaps, getting reps one-on-one against Aaron Donald, you better put an extra blocker by him. Give him a tight end, an H-back, somebody. Because if Donald is going to have a one-on-one battle against Decker, brace yourself. So, yeah. Taylor, your pick was 27-25 Lions.
Exactly.
Oh, goodness.
All I want is honesty.
I'm expecting offense. I'm expecting points. And as long as Jared Goff does not have that complete, because listen, let's look at that other elephant in the room. I mentioned the 11 plus turnovers that Jared Goff has had since week 11. Will we see that come into fruition in this game? If so, that will make things much more difficult. That being said, I am going to look at all of that and say, with all those factors in mind, my final score prediction would be Lions 37, Rams 35.
Oh, man. Almost a slugfest. I got to look at the speaking of which, I got to look at the over-under on this game here.
It's 51.5. Trust me.
That's got to go way over.
To me, I will be smashing the over in this one.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Especially Stafford against this secondary. Come on now.
Yeah. Second. Yeah, and that's why the secondary needs help from Mike Sainristil still from next year on forward. By the way,
would hope so.
Yeah. So, Ed and Chris Pomay and I picked the Lions to win by a very close margin. So the Red Wings, they sweep the West Coast and then come back home to get outshot 47-17 and lose to the Edmonton Oilers in overtime 3-2. This outshooting, before we get to the record and points and standings, this margin in shots on goal is unacceptable. I know the Oilers are good even under former Red Wings general manager Ken Holland in their front office. This is just 17 shot or 48-18 or whatever. This kind of shots on goal margin is beyond unacceptable and terrible.
It's a bad indictment on your defense and also how you move the puck around and try to implement your offensive game plan. If you're not aggressive on offense, you're certainly not going to be aggressive on defense.
Yeah.
And if that lack of aggression leads to other teams taking advantage and getting the head start on you, and that's what we saw here in this one. Credit to Alex Lyon. He frankly stood on his head for a majority of this game, but unfortunately, Edmonton got that one extra shot in.
Yeah, because the
But I
Oilers
will.
have a loaded offense, and Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman, former Michigan Wolverine hockey player.
Mm-hmm. By the way,
all those guys.
By the way, nice to see a crop of that still popping up in the league. Nothing but Wolverine hockey players.
Yeah, along with Andrew Kopp and JT Compher and Dylan Larkin.
Exactly. Now, I will say though, going into tonight's game, the Red Wings had done a good job bringing in the new year with winning 4 of their past 5 games, going back to right before the year had even ended, 2023 had ended. In that span, especially with this West Coast trip, you had Sprong with 4 points. Perron had 2-goal game against San Jose. You had Kane winning the game against the Kings in LA with the shootout goal. And then throughout this stretch, you're seeing Alex Lyon take on the bulk of the duties at goaltender. And frankly, compared to what we saw so far from Husso and Reimer, you take it. Right now, at the moment, granted, it's a very small sample size, but he's 8-4. He's got a goals allowed average of 2.5. He's got a save percentage in the 900s. And he's getting himself a little underground social media campaign going on to potentially send him to the All-Star game in Toronto. So, I don't think he'll get it, but it's at least good to know that his effort is not being ignored. It's being paid attention to.
Better statistics than Reimer and Husso individually, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the goalie got wings 1 point tonight. And that second Red Wings goal as well, late in that third period, a little late in that third period or midway through, but again, that should have been a regulation loss, to be honest.
Yeah, it was because of the strength of Lions' performance that he even got to overtime in the first place. So I agree with Chris on that.
Yeah, heard trade rumors Kane to Winnipeg for 2 draft picks. Oh,
that would be
which one, Patrick or Evander? I would assume it's Patrick Kane.
I'm assuming Patrick, because I don't see anybody doing anything for Evander Kane. No.
Yeah. So yeah,
trust me. It's called. They see that Patrick Kane still has what it takes to be a key contributor to a Stanley Cup winning team. That's what that's called.
Larkin is not an elite player. He's a good player, but he's not elite. I have to agree with Chris
I
on
would agree with that. I would agree with that, especially with of how I was adamant of how he should not be making elite level money.
Right.
And Eisman found a way to get that done with his contract. So yeah, I agree. That does not offend me at all. And I like Larkin. I like the kid. I think he's the right player for this team. I think he's the right guy to be the captain. But yeah, do I think he's a great player? No, but he could still be one potentially one day. He just isn't one right now.
Could add more discipline on the ice too.
More discipline and again, more consistent years of the year that he had last year. If you can give me 25, 30 goals a year, still set your teammates up.
He keeps getting kicked out of face-off circles.
That's concerning. That's a little bit that's concerning to see to an extent. I know you have other guys available that specialize in that.
That's an example of a lack of discipline that I was trying to point out.
Exactly. Well, that will explain why. Hopefully he works on that, but still, one reason why he will be in that good but not great category. At least at the moment.
Yeah. But anyway, Oh my goodness, the Pistons get humiliated by the San Antonio Spurs, 130 to 108, drop to 3-35. The Spurs are 6-30,
Yeah,
and
this
they
was
humiliate the Pistons at home at Little Caesars Arena earlier this week. That was
yeah.
just last night.
Yeah, my friend who was a big, massive Spurs fan his whole life, I told him this is like the battle of the mid, um, because of
NBA
what.
tank finals.
Yeah, you could say that in a way, but even still, even the Pistons tank somehow seems to be even stronger than ever before. But frankly, this is just a precursor to how this whole week is going to look because and the last few games have not been kind in terms of them trying to establish and get more wins. You had this route against the Spurs. You had the late lead you blew against the Warriors. And now on top of all that, now you come to find out, oh, Kate Cunningham, he'll be out for 7 to 10 days with a strain in his left knee. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. But I also wanted to point out not only are the Pistons still turning the ball over, they cannot defend their own lane. They're not closing it out.
Please.
That's what I've been hearing from Rick Mahorn as I was listening to the Pistons on 101.1 FM WGRY in Grayling, Up North Sports Radio. Shout out to Jerry and Cheryl Coyne, by the way, at Blarney Stone Broadcasting up there, up north, farther up north in northern Michigan, somewhere in my neck of the woods. But Rick Mahorn had more good analysis on the Pistons' lack of defense in their own lane, in their own paint.
Yeah, it's that part, and also the fact that for some reason Killian Hayes does not know how to properly operate the pick and roll. At least with James Wiseman, you have this big 7-foot dude that's able to get these screens effectively. He's rolling to the basket, and you're either too scared or too stupid to lob him the damn basketball. Please, for the love of God, get this guy off of my basketball team. Let's never forever.
Which one, Hayes or Wiseman?
Hayes, I'll eject Hayes to the moon in an instant. Okay, this is the guy.
Send him to the G League or something. Maybe he'll develop there.
Listen, dude, it's been 4 years. Enough is enough. I've seen enough. This is the guy that you took over Tyrese Halliburton. I will never forget that. The guy
who would want him.
I don't know. DFU amnesty his ass.
That's the point. That's why they need to send him down to the G League.
Amnesty him. I don't care. Get him out of town. He sucks. He's garbage.
He sucks.
He does not deserve to be here.
Yeah. Like I pointed out in last week's episode, he sucks. Yeah, Killian Hayes sucks.
Awful. Tyrese Halliburton just had a game where he had 20 points, 20 assists, and 0 turnovers. And meanwhile, I got a guy that's too scared to throw a 7-foot dude a lob at the rim.
Yeah, I know, right? Ay, caramba.
Listen, between that and Michigan basketball, listen, if I had all I gotta say is thank God for the Lions and the Wolverines football team. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. And speaking of college basketball, Michigan State just lost to Illinois 71-68. That was closer than what I thought. Michigan State has been struggling, but they went to Illinois only to lose by 3 points, not like 10 or 20.
It's still a loss, and it's still becoming even more and more apparent that Tom Izzo, frankly, he has lost it. He does not have it anymore either. I'm sorry, Michigan State fans, but that's the truth.
Yeah, Michigan sports truth, by the way. And Tom Izzo may have to. It's getting to be that time. He may have to hang it up.
Hey, listen, we just saw in 2 days, Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, whacked. Nick Saban, retired.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Listen, Coach K, he's gone. I'm just saying, Tommy.
Yep, all old age.
You're on deck.
Yep. The Tigers, they avoid arbitration with Akil Baddoo and Jake Rogers and Tarek Skubal on 1-year contracts, but they failed to reach a deal with Casey Mize, according to Evan Petzold of the Detroit Free Press.
Well, I expect arbitration to rule in favor of the team because nothing that Mize has done or shown, in my opinion, has warranted what he would be asking for, in my opinion.
I'll stay on top of that one.
Good job. Good job with avoiding arbitration with the other guys. But for Mize, it bothers me not one bit, one way or the other.
Yeah, and to be honest, Mize clearly just hasn't done enough to earn a new contract with the Tigers.
Right. And you're coming
That's
off Tommy John. Come on.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but Mize is a bust.
Yeah, don't remind me.
Yeah. So, what all did we learn this week?
It's simple. We learned that Michigan was the best team in America for all of 2023, and for valid, good reason.
And they still are the number one in the AP poll rankings after the win.
We learned that they were a team of strength, a team of character, a team of strong will, a team of togetherness. Frankly, we learned they were a team of destiny. And no matter what investigations or what fallout or what changes may or may not happen, nothing will take away the feelings and the memories that I have had and I've learned to cherish and bank in from watching this season. So that's what I learned from watching my Michigan Wolverines. We learned that, frankly, the Pistons. What else there is to learn? We learned that they're just in a slow death march to trying to get this season over with as quickly as possible. Frankly,
and fans are still chanting "Sell the team,"
and for good reason. And we learned that, frankly, hopefully,
yet Tom Gore still coddles this team for no reason.
We learned that Cade Cunningham still needs massive help in so many ways. Otherwise, he's going to grind himself into dust and for absolutely nothing. We also learned that the Red Wings made some improvements over the past week, but still have ways to go. You can't have that lack of aggressive effort, especially at home. And you can't, be stuck in a middling place within your own division and expect to make the playoffs. But and what we learned that, frankly, the Lions, they took a bit of a gamble this past Sunday. They almost backfired, but they have the pieces necessary, in my opinion, to get what needs to be gotten done, and that is finally get that playoff win and to do it at home, first time ever in Ford Field history, and against of all friggin' people, Matthew Stafford. Frankly, if you're the NFL,
and the Los Angeles Rams,
you could not have written a better script.
Exactly. And we predicted even before the Dallas game that the Lions were going to play the Rams in a wild card game at Ford Field.
We were manifesting it. Did
even a few weeks ago.
Did we not manifest that shit? I'm just saying.
I know. Yeah, it was going to be a nice ring to it the whole time, right?
Yeah, it just made the most sense. And you know what? That's one reason, and not the biggest reason, why it's getting the Sunday night treatment for NBC. Because of all the other factors, Detroit's playoff history, the storylines and narratives that I mentioned before, Jared Goff against, Sean McVay, that revenge game factor for him. What can Brad Holmes do against his former team with the pieces that he had acquired as a result of the Matthew Stafford trade? And Stafford, of course, returning to Detroit. That's where it starts and ends. And frankly, I would not be surprised if it comes down to where Stafford has the ball. It's 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and it's a one-score game. And you learn to live with that roller coaster, period.
Yes, exactly. So that's all we've learned. And that's another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast in the can. Follow the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on X and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like its Facebook page. Subscribe to its YouTube channel at the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Like our videos and turn on all notifications on the bell icon, and follow it and listen to it in audio form on Spreaker. Follow me on X, Taylor Phillips, on X, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at DT2Phillips. And follow Ed Smith on X, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube at Ed Smith 313. Ed Smith, you do your shout out first on that place that I forgot what that was located in Birmingham, right?
Yeah, that's a shout out to Jade at Union Barber.
Jade at Union Barber, or Jade and Union?
Jade and the fine folks at Union Barber in Birmingham.
Okay, Union Barber. Okay. Okay.
And shout out to Gordon with his team at both United Mobile Power Wash and Dry Ice Works. They operate out of Hilltop in Southfield.
Oh, well, what was that? What was that car wash again?
United Mobile Power Wash and Dry Ice Works.
Mobile Power Wash and Dry Ice Works. Is Ice Works in one word or two?
Dry. No, it's 2 words.
Oh, 2 words. Okay.
Dry Ice Works.
Okay. Thanks. All right. In what city?
In Southfield.
Southfield. Thanks. In Southfield. Okay. All right. So that shout out to that. And then Athletico Physical Therapy on Woodward and Ferndale, of course. The B4 Foundation, Burke's Waterfront Restaurant in Cadillac. Cali Tickets, call Mark Goldman at 877-225-8425 or visit CaliTickets.com. Shout out to Chris Pame of Live with CDP on WQE 99.1 FM in Atlanta, Georgia. By the way, the contents are there. Also, Creative Embroidery of Cadillac for designing the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast logo on my long sleeve shirt and t-shirt. Cuts by Melanie in Lake City. Let's roll with it. Rolled ice cream. Peaches and cream is still the flavor of the week, but check out the regular menu for the 15 ice cream flavors, including the watermelon crawl. Also, check out their gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches, including the smoked bacon. Oh yeah, and they can even add raspberry jelly to it too. And I had one. It was great. Add a little sweetness to the sandwich too. Northern Star Event Rentals in Cadillac, 231-884-8195, and on Facebook. And, of course, United Food Service Solutions of Grand Ledge, Michigan. Our next episode is next Thursday at 10 p.m. Next Friday, I'll be down in St. Louis, Michigan, for the Ithaca St. Louis girls and boys basketball doubleheader on WMLM 105.9 FM 1520 a.m. So we'll do it next Thursday at 10:30 p.m. By the way, that doubleheader tips off at 6 and then 7:30. By the way, next Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for those in the Gratiot area, tune into WMLM 105.9 FM 1520 a.m. But until next Thursday at 10:30 p.m. back here on the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. For Ed Smith, I'm Taylor Phillips. Remember that we observe and detect the truth about Michigan sports, because the truth is out there. Hit them with a hind. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Go Blue, national champions.
Indeed. Take care of you, everybody.